For most of us, death is the ultimate unknown, a doorway shrouded in mystery, grief, and questions that no science has conclusively answered. But what if someone claimed to have pierced that veil, not through belief or imagination, but through experience? Edgar Cayce, often called the sleeping prophet, didn't just hint at life after death, he described it in striking detail. Born in 1877 in rural Kentucky, he was no mystic by birth. In fact, he was a devout Christian, raised in a conservative community, who first discovered his unusual ability while trying to cure his own voice loss. When in a trance-like sleep, Cayce could diagnose illnesses, prescribe treatments, and more controversially, speak of things far beyond the physical body, including the soul's journey after death. To understand Cayce's revelations about the afterlife, we must first grasp the lens through which he saw the world. He believed that the human being was not simply flesh and blood, but spirit housed in matter. The physical body was temporary, just one chapter in a vast, eternal story. In trance, he would describe the soul as having lived multiple lives, each designed not as punishment or reward, but as a learning process. Earth, in his view, was a kind of spiritual school, and death? Death was not an end, but a transition. These weren't vague metaphysical musings. Cayce gave detailed, consistent descriptions of what happens after death. He said that after leaving the body, the soul passes through several planes of consciousness, each more subtle than the last, where it reviews its life, learns from its choices, and prepares for what's next. Some of these insights eerily align with modern near-death experiences reported by people of all backgrounds. A tunnel, a light, a sense of peace, a life review. Cayce spoke of these phenomena decades before they became common topics in resuscitation research. But what's more fascinating is not just that he spoke of life beyond, but that he claimed this knowledge wasn't unique to him. According to Cayce, all of us already carry these memories deep within. He believed the soul remembers its origins, its purpose, and its future, but only in altered states, such as dreams or near-death experiences, do these memories become accessible. That's why he saw dreams as so important. They weren't nonsense, they were encoded messages from the eternal self. If dreams were glimpses into the soul's true nature, then every night offered us a chance to remember who we really are. Cayce emphasized this not as philosophy, but as practical guidance. He encouraged people to write down their dreams, study their symbols, and treat them as messages from the spiritual realm. In many of his readings, he explained that recurring dreams, especially those involving flight, water, or being reunited with loved ones, were not random but fragments of the soul's eternal memory surfacing through the unconscious. These fragments, when decoded, revealed not only past experiences but hints about the journey yet to come. Cayce didn't invent these ideas. In fact, ancient traditions from Egypt, Greece, and India had long spoken of the soul's travels between lives. But what made his work so powerful was the consistency and depth of detail across thousands of readings, many given to strangers, whose lives he knew nothing about consciously. Without fail, his descriptions would trace the same path. After death, the soul detaches from the body, guided by beings of light through realms of vibration that mirror its spiritual development. There's no fire or brimstone, only learning, reflection, and preparation. And yet, despite his gentle tone, his words carried weight. He warned that unresolved emotions, anger, guilt, selfishness, could cling to the soul, delaying its progress. In this view, heaven and hell weren't places, but states of consciousness that each soul must pass through depending on its choices. A life lived in service, love, and humility allowed the soul to move easily through the higher planes. But a life dominated by ego, cruelty, or fear, that soul would find itself trapped in denser realms, not as punishment, but because it wasn't yet ready to rise. To Cayce, the afterlife was not a mystery to be feared, but a reality to be prepared for. Every action, every word, even every thought became part of the soul's ongoing story. Death, then, was not the end of the book, just the end of a chapter. And how you lived that chapter would shape everything that came after. This understanding transformed how many people approached grief. Cayce's readings brought comfort not through vague hope, but through specific insight. He explained that the connection between souls doesn't break at death, it only changes form. Love, he said, is a force stronger than physical separation. A deceased parent watching over their child, a spouse sending a sign in a moment of crisis, these weren't just wishful thinking. To Cayce, they were real, subtle interactions between realms. He described how those who had passed on often tried to reach the living through dreams, intuition, or sudden feelings that came with no logical cause. A warm sensation during meditation, a familiar voice in the stillness, or a specific object falling at just the right time, these were the quiet whispers of souls trying to say, "I'm still here." But Cayce also warned against obsessing over the dead or calling them back through rituals. The soul, once free, had its own path forward. Interference from the living could confuse or delay their progress. Instead, he urged people to honor the departed by living more fully, by transforming sorrow into compassion, and by trusting that real love never vanishes, it only changes dimension. Edgar Cayce emphasized that the soul's journey continues through realms we can't always perceive, but that doesn't mean it's distant. He spoke of what he called planes of consciousness, levels of spiritual experience that exist side by side with our own, separated not by distance but by vibration. The deceased, he explained, often reside on these higher planes. They observe, guide, and sometimes even influence our thoughts and feelings without ever speaking a word. These insights helped reframe death not as an end, but as a change in the state of being, similar to waking from a dream or entering a new chapter in a book. In Cayce's vision, a soul wasn't trapped in a static afterlife. Instead, it evolved. It learned. It healed. And sometimes, it reached back, not to haunt, but to help. Real-life stories began to emerge that mirrored Cayce's descriptions. People waking from a dream with advice they swore came from their late grandmother, soldiers in battle sensing an invisible hand pushing them out of harm's way, only to later learn that a loved one had passed at that very hour. These weren't ghost stories, they were expressions of continued relationship, grounded in love rather than fear. Cayce urged us to pay attention to these subtle nudges. He believed that when we quiet the noise of daily life, when we open our inner senses, we become better able to feel the presence of those who've crossed over. Not with fear, not with superstition, but with reverence, with openness, and with a heart willing to listen. In Cayce's readings, there was one recurring message that stood above all: love never dies. He insisted that the emotional bonds we forge in this life, especially those formed in selflessness, compassion, and deep care, carry a kind of spiritual energy that transcends the grave. This isn't just poetic sentiment. According to Cayce, love is a literal force. It's the connective tissue of the universe, and it's through love that the dead most often reach the living. He gave examples of people sensing a shift in the atmosphere during moments of intense emotion, grief, joy, or longing. A sudden warmth in the room, a soft breeze without an open window, a song playing at exactly the right moment. These weren't coincidences, he said. They were signatures, like fingerprints from the other side, left behind by souls who still care deeply and want to reassure us they haven't vanished. This teaching brought comfort to those paralyzed by grief. Suddenly, death didn't mean abandonment. It meant presence in a different form, gentler, quieter, but no less real. Cayce believed that if we learned to tune our hearts, we could receive these signals more clearly. Not through seances or rituals, but through prayer, meditation, and sincere remembrance. He once described a woman who dreamed of her husband for 7 nights straight. Each time, she woke with a clear message: how to handle the finances he left behind, how to care for their garden, how to forgive his brother. When she asked Cayce if it was truly him, his answer was simple: the soul knows. To Cayce, the heart always recognizes truth when it hears it, especially when spoken from beyond the veil. But not all messages from the other side come in comfort. Cayce acknowledged that sometimes, the presence we feel may stir fear or confusion, not because the soul means harm, but because unresolved emotions linger. He spoke of grief as a bridge, but also a fog. When the living cling too tightly to the dead, or when the dead hold regret too tightly, the communication can become tangled, unclear. One case involved a man haunted by the recurring scent of burnt tobacco, always at night, always near his father's favorite chair. He couldn't sleep, grew agitated, and even questioned his sanity. Cayce, after going into trance, revealed that the father had passed with a deep worry. He never said goodbye, never made peace. The scent wasn't a haunting. It was a call to closure. Cayce believed the dead often try to finish what they couldn't in life. This might take the form of symbols, dreams, or persistent emotional echoes. And just as the living need healing, so do spirits. He encouraged writing letters to the departed, speaking aloud in private moments, or simply holding space in silence. The point was not to summon, but to release, to create a channel of peace. What's remarkable is that Cayce never turned this into spectacle. No stage tricks, no dramatics. He spoke of spirit contact with the seriousness of someone describing a sunrise, natural, powerful, and inevitable. His emphasis was always on healing. The soul, he once said, seeks harmony, whether in this world or the next. To him, our loved ones do not linger to frighten us. They linger because love, duty, or sorrow has tethered them. And until both sides find peace, the connection, though invisible, remains active, waiting to be acknowledged and completed. Cayce warned that misinterpreting these signs could lead to fear-based beliefs or even exploitation. Not every unexplained sound or flickering light is a soul reaching out. The human mind, he said, is both a receiver and a projector. Sometimes what we think is a message from beyond is really our own unresolved longing echoing back. That's why he emphasized discernment. A true spiritual encounter, according to Cayce, brings a sense of calm clarity, not panic or dread. It aligns with intuition, not paranoia. He believed the dead do not return to harm the living, but to heal what's unfinished. And when they do come close, the experience is rarely loud or theatrical. It's subtle, an emotional whisper, a fleeting presence, a gentle nudge toward closure. One widow Cayce helped spoke of hearing her husband's voice once, clearly, just as she stood at the edge of despair. "I'm still with you," it said, and then silence. That brief moment gave her the strength to keep living. Cayce explained that such events aren't hallucinations, they're soul-to-soul contact. Not constant, not repeatable, but real. He viewed death not as an end, but a doorway. And occasionally, just occasionally, that door opens from the other side, not to haunt us, but to remind us that love, once truly formed, is never undone. As we sift through the strange signs, the quiet dreams, the uncanny moments that feel like more than coincidence, we're reminded of something profound. Maybe death is not the final silence. Maybe it's just a shift in how love speaks. Cayce never claimed to have all the answers, but he offered a hopeful lens, that life is part of a greater journey, and our bonds, those forged by love, by shared experience, by spirit, aren't severed by a last breath. They simply evolve. And sometimes, through dreams, scents, whispers, or inexplicable comfort, the departed remind us, you are not alone. He urged us not to chase ghosts, but to live meaningfully. He believed that if we listen not just with ears, but with open hearts, we might hear the most important message of all, that death cannot erase connection. And healing doesn't always come from forgetting. Sometimes, it comes from remembering, deeply and with grace. If you've ever felt something you couldn't explain, a brush of air, a dream that felt like more than a dream, a presence that gave you peace, you're not alone. Maybe, just maybe, someone you love found a way to say goodbye, or perhaps, I'm still here. Thank you for watching. If this message resonated with you, consider subscribing and sharing your story in the comments. Your experiences might help someone else feel less alone. And if you believe there's more to this life than what we see, join us for the next journey, because the mystery is only beginning.